Book 2, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I'm Jackie, and I'm finally doing an author spotlight on one of my favorite authors, Kate Morton. And she's probably the only author where I'm up to date. I've read all of her books because, like, even with Stephen King or Brandon Sanderson, I'm not always interested in all their books, especially with Stephen King. And I mean, even with Anne Rice, I don't know if I'm going to be interested in all her books. Now there are some older authors like Jane Austen or Dickens where they're long gone, and Jane Austen doesn't have that many books to begin with unless you count her juvenilia. Then there's probably a lot of juvenilia I haven't yet read. So, and with Dickens, I don't know yet. I might like all of his works, I don't know. But anyway, Kate Morton is an Australian author. It was, who writes historical fiction. Often they have a mystery element to it, although her stories are often back and forth between the past and the present. So half the story does take place in the modern times, and then the other half takes place in the past. She is originally from Queensland, south, in the rainforest in south. Let me look at. I wrote. Let me see if I can. Oh, I gotta move this screen a little bit. Okay, she is from the Tamborine Mountains. She grew up on the Tamborine Mountains within the rainforest of southeast Queensland in Australia. And, would often, playing games and make believe with her sisters, like a lot of us did growing up. And she did go to, what was the college? She got a law degree, but as, a very familiar story, she ended up not sticking with law and got inspired to become part of the theater community, got the theater bug, and studied at Trinity College, and also went to took a summer course on Shakespeare at the Royal Academy. And I'm guessing it's probably where she fell in love with England. That's why most of her all of her novels take place in between Australia and the UK. Some of them just take place in one or the other location, but a lot of her stories, like the first one I ever fell in love with, which is The Forgotten Garden. This is the first book I ever got by Kate Morton. First book I ever got by Kate Morton. I got this I think it was Christmas when I got this book. It was either Christmas or my birthday. And I just fell in love with her writing and this particular story, and I definitely want to. And since then, I've explored all of her works. And one of the things that bugs me, one of my pet peeves, is that people assume that she copied off of The Secret Garden, and the only thing this book has in common with The Secret Garden is there is a secret garden involved in the story, and it is about an orphan girl. But it is also about a mother and a daughter, and there is no imperialism of Indian colonialism, so India is not even involved in the story. It's focused on Australia and England. And if you actually have read this book, for those people who accuse this of being copying off of or stealing from The Secret Garden, if you actually read the book, you'll know there is very little in common with Secret Garden. And that's been one of my pet peeves about this. I've read reviews on this, wondering what people thought of it, wondering if what other people think of Kate Morton, if other people love her as much as I do, or if there's people that don't like her. And like I said, one of the negative comments was because the title, and it involves a garden and an orphan girl, so people assume that she stole from Frances Hodgson Burnett's book. Like, if you actually read it, then you would know that's not true. But anyway, and actually her first book was not this one. But her first one was, where is it? Not the Distant House at Riverton. And originally it was called The Shifting Fog. But when it was published in England, that she said that her publisher in England wanted to change it because fog is is something that's very relevant in England, and they didn't like her using fog in the shifting fog in her title. So she changed it, The House at Riverton. And this particular one is about these sisters and a poet killing himself, supposedly having killed himself. And it has been a long time since I read this, and this is one of the ones I need to reread, along with The Clockmaker's Daughter, I think it's called, and The Secret Keeper, in the Lake House. And all of those I want to reread those. But I've read The Distant Hours and The Forgotten Garden multiple times. So often her books involve, like I said, there's often a mystery and someone in the modern day getting a little bit of information from the past and learning about what happened, getting an idea of something that happened a long time ago and slowly piecing it together through other people, or reading, or going to the library and reading books and getting newspaper articles and, doing internet searches. So often her books often focus on themes of how the past can affect the present, how you act in the present can alter how you act, what happened in the past, what happens to you in the past can alter how you are in the present day, and can affect your choices. Like her most recent book, Homecoming, is very much highlights that as this horrible event that happened to our narrator's grandmother decides a lot of the decisions she makes for herself and her daughter Polly, and then later her granddaughter. And it also, without Jess, the granddaughter, and our narrator realizing it, it's the reason that she doesn't have that. The reason for what happened in the past is the reason why she has the relationship she does with her grandmother, and why she has the relationship she does with her mom. It changes how it works. So there's a lot of, and of course, being a female author, there's a lot of focus on bonds between relationships between sisters and mothers. This one is a lot of focus on mothers, the relationship between the what is the grandmother? The relationship between trying to think, Nora, the grandmother Nora, and her relationship between her daughter Polly, and Polly's relationship with Jess, and Jess's relationship with Nora, and how she sees Nora versus how she sees Polly. This one focuses a lot on that and their relationship. Their very complicated relationship, and their bond as a mother and daughter between both Nora and Polly and Jess and Nora. And as Jess slowly learns about, in the book, as Jess learns about what happened to Nora, she starts to realize that Nora isn't infallible, that she might not be the perfect mother. And, Polly herself, ever since she was growing up, she was told that her mom was perfect, the perfect mother, and that she sacrificed so much. And so it puts pressure on Polly, and then she's feels like she's doomed to fail because she will never live up to Nora as a mom. So there's a lot of focus on mother-daughter relationship in this one. The same thing with The Forgotten Garden. There's a lot of mother-daughter focus on this one, and what makes a mother, what makes you a good mother, and the same with The Secret Keeper. There's a lot of that in there, as in this one too. And then you have books like these two, which focus on friendship and sisterhood, and not, and the bonds of sisters and how complicated that can be and what you'll sacrifice. Not only will mothers make sacrifices, but older sisters will make sacrifices for their younger sisters, and younger sisters will make sacrifices for their older ones, especially in times of hardship, in times where your family is messed, has a lot of issues that they need to work through, and you either can choose to be supportive and help each other, or and then or you can be resentful of each other, or you can find ways to communicate and work it out. And sometimes sisters will hold on just as tight as mothers will, and even in fathers too. But of course Kate Morton focuses on women relationship as a female author. There is, of course, men in her stories. There's romances in her stories, but they don't dominate the story. The whole story, like, if you're a romance reader, where you want the romance or even smut in there, there is none of that. There's no smut. There is romance, and there might be some, and there's a little bit of intimacy, but it's like fade to black kind of thing. It's more focused on the romance, the romanticism of it when it is there, but not, not the intimacy, or at least not the sexual acts, for instance. But again, it's not the main. Her main themes are female relationships, and how the past will affect you in the present. Even if you were, even if you didn't exist, it can affect you it can affect you even if you weren't there. If you didn't even exist at the time, someone's past can change who you are. And also, if you learn about it, then it can also change who you are, because it will give you a whole new perspective. But yeah, that is what often she focuses on, the relationships between women and the importance of that, and how that can be messed up, and how that can be very flawed, and how you need to how the importance of working on that and fixing it, but not just sweeping it under the rug or doing the easiest thing, but actually communicating and understanding each other and having sympathy for each other, and not automatically dismissing each other for the mistakes you've made. Like, forgiveness is very important and very valuable, and there's a lot of needing to forgive in her novels. I also love how she talks about how she describes the past. You really get immersed in in this world, and the past that she creates. I also, she's also a big fan of, like, haunted houses. So often, almost all of her books involve, I don't know, The Secret Keeper, I think, is the one that doesn't have as much focus on, I don't think. I mean, maybe all of her books, I don't remember. Like I said, I need to reread some of them. But I think almost all of them focus on haunted houses, because she loves haunted houses. I mean, the houses, not haunted houses necessarily, but houses with a past, with a history, and understanding that. There is a quote from her. My mom was an antique dealer, and she installed in me a fascination with objects from the past. I used to wander around her shop, picking up rusty little tin boxes and old spoons, holding them in my hand and wondering at the many lives they'd led before they came to us. In the summer holidays, we would drive from Tambourine to Brisbane to visit my grandmother, and the 1-hour journey would easily stretch to 3 as Mom stopped at each of her favorite second-hand shops along the way. Thankfully, I could always count on the dark back corner of the shop where the tattered pre-loved books had been haphazardly stacked, and where I was sure to find another treasure to add to my collection. And obviously it's probably what inspired her to write her books, because often, it reflects her looking, the main character looking back on finding something from the past and looking back, or hearing words about someone's past. When someone, like the most recent book, Homecoming, she overhears her grandmother, overhears Nora, who was talking about, hinting at something that happened a long time ago. But she doesn't tell her everything, she only hears a little bit of information. So imagine her mom being an antique dealer and discovering all these things and like all these objects from the past and wondering what they're about. Imagine it kind of reflects how she, what inspires her novels. Because they're all about that. They're all about exploring having an object and exploring the past through that object. I mean, even with newspaper articles, old newspaper articles, they're still an object. And then, looking at them and getting, wondering, reading the story, and the newspaper gives you there's a limitation to what you read in the newspaper. And so you can read, you might, read between the lines and wonder what is going on, what the newspaper doesn't tell you. What information it doesn't give you. Wondering what really happened, because the newspaper doesn't highlight everything, doesn't tell all the details. It tells you what it can get. And sometimes it will make up stuff, even if it is a newspaper. The Forgotten Garden is probably still my favorite of her books. But it's also because it was my first by her. So I have to, so there's a bias. But every time I reread her books, all of a sudden I just fall in love with that book. And that almost can potentially become one of my favorite. Although the Clockmaker's Daughter, I don't remember that one. So I don't know what that one says about that book or about me. But I do need to reread it. I might have, rushed reading that one because it was like, I had finally bought it. I was like, oh, I need to read this book because it's been out for a long time and I finally bought it, so I need to read it. So I might have rushed through that one, but I do want to reread it. Although I did really love The Secret Keeper. That was another good one, and there was a time when I was big into World War II, particularly the not necessarily I kind of like the style of the 40s and, the time period, not exactly thinking about what was going on during World War II and, all the horrors of, what happened to the Jewish community. I did not think about that stuff. I was more the fun side, the romanticism of that time period, and oh, these men are going to war, and these women are fighting, and like showing the Rosie the Riveter and all that stuff. That was the aspect I liked when I was younger, but I was also like middle school age at the time, in my defense. So I didn't think about, at the time I was not thinking about the horrors of World War II. But I still like, World War II. I like, the 40s and then the 20s, and that's what I think the house at Riverton there was a lot of focus on the 20s, the 1920s. It has a very Gatsby, Zelda and F. Scott Fitzgerald kind of feel, and, like I said, the main character is a poet in that book. I really loved, Homecoming. That was real. I was happy to have read that. I enjoyed that. Let's see. The Lake House. I really liked it. I'm trying to think what's. I don't remember. For some reason I get this one, The Lake House, mixed up with The Secret Keeper. But it's so if you like historical, mystery stories, not detective mysteries, or stories where you question, where, like Ruth Ware, where she's the unreliable narrator. I mean, there could be a little bit of that unreliable narrator stuff in her books, but, okay, somebody did it really weird on the screen, so let me redo it, like pause or something. So what I was saying was that if you like stories that are historical, but also like back and forth between the past and the present. Which I can understand, though. I mean, I've heard other people talk about that her timelines can be very confusing because you're going back and forth a lot, and then there's sometimes multiple. There's a lot of characters. I mean, she does put the time, what year it is, on the top of the page once you're going to a different. And she doesn't necessarily do it in the middle of the chapter. So, but I do understand where some people might find her, that confusing because it jumps around. Her books jump around in time a lot. But I love multiple timeline stories, and of course, as a female reader, I really appreciate and enjoy stories between sisters and mothers and daughters. So if you like those kinds of stories where it focuses on those kinds of relationships between sisters and relationships between mothers and daughters, like I think like I said, if you like sister relationships, then I would recommend starting with these two. I'm trying to. I think there's a lot of focus on mothers and daughters with these three. If you're interested in that, in mother-daughter relationships. Like I said, I don't remember a lot about the Lake House or the Clockmaker's Daughter. Those two I definitely need to reread, but I also need to reread House at Riverton and The Secret Keeper. And what else about her books that and like now she does often stay in her lane. She mostly focuses, and if you like if you like the history of learning about the past and the history of an old object, like a house or a personal object of someone's, then you might. That's another thing. That's another element that she puts in all of her stories. And again, if you like stories where you learn, not just learn about the past, but you understand how the past reflects on the present. And so I guess that's all I want to talk about. I think I want other people who like historical fiction to check out her books. I think they're great. Lisa, she does stay in her lane, so she always writes about a lot of the same themes in similar stories. So if you're the kind of reader who doesn't want to feel like, maybe if you're the kind of reader who doesn't always want to read, wants the author to mix it up and do completely different types of stories, then maybe read her books. If you do read her books, just read them, space them out a little bit. Don't read them all one and right after together, unless you don't mind that. Because yeah, she does write the same, stays in her lane, writes the same kind of stories, just and often all her stories take place in either England or Australia. But there are, obviously there are differences, like the characters, the types of characters that she, like each of her women have different backgrounds, different histories, and it's always set in a different time period. But anyway, so yeah, that's it. That's all I want. I just want to get, I want people to read her books. I think people should give her books a shot if you like historical, but don't mind it going back and forth between historical and present day history, the past and the present day, if you don't mind that. And if you like a little mystery, but not like a detective mystery type, or scary mystery, like, but stories where, like I said, someone trying to figure out what happened a long time ago, and then also, and her books do sometimes there is often murder involved, and people, kids getting, orphan children, kids getting taken from their parent, not like this is not necessarily hard to explain, you know, because she writes beautiful stories, you know, but there are elements of it that I do wonder if they would, you know, bother people. But so so that's all I'm gonna say. I'm like rambling now. I just want people to give her a shot, like people who like historical fiction, to try her out. And I hope you do. So I will talk to you all later. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk on Kate Morton. Bye. Enjoy your reading.